दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। ईमान में वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना। ईमान में वक्त से एक रिश्ता।
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Sermon for Kids. Today I am once again joined by two incredible panelists, Haris, Hassan. I hope you are both doing well. Are you both prepared for today's episode?
Yes, Farhan bhai. I spent a few hours preparing for this week's episode.
Yeah, me too. I'm also prepared for this week's episode.
That is excellent to hear. Now, Huzoor provided a very faith-inspiring address in this week's sermon. And he continued to talk about the Battle of Uhud and some inspiring incidents within it. But before we delve deeper into these incidents, let's listen to a clip from this week's Khutbah.
हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के हुक्म से हज़रत उमर ने खालिद बिन वलीद की कमान में पहाड़ पर हमले को किस तरह नाकाम बनाया। इस बारे में यूँ जिक्र मिलता है कि जब रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम सहाबा की जमात के साथ इस चट्टान पर क़याम फरमा थे, अचानक कुरैश की एक जमात पहाड़ के ऊपर पहुंच गई। इस जमात में खालिद बिन वलीद भी थे। हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने दुश्मन को ऊपर देखकर दुआ की कि अल्लाहुम्मा इन्नहु ला यंबग़ी लहुम अन यालूना अल्लाहुम्मा ला क़ुव्वता लना इल्ला बिका। ए अल्लाह, इनके लिए जायज़ नहीं कि वो हम पर गालिब आएँ। ए अल्लाह, हमारी ताकत व क़ुव्वत नहीं है मगर सिर्फ़ तेरे ही ज़रिए। उसी वक्त हज़रत उमर फ़ारूक ने मुहाजिरीन की एक जमात के साथ इन लोगों का मुकाबला किया और उन्हें पीछे धकेल कर पहाड़ी से नीचे उतरने पर मजबूर कर दिया। इस वाक़े के सिलसिले में अल्लाह ताला का ये इरशाद नाज़िल हुआ, वला ताहिनु वला तहज़नु व अंतुमुल आलौना इन कुंतुम मोमिनीन।
The incidents from within the Battle of Uhud provide Muslims across the globe the evidence about the spiritual fortitude of the companions and of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And as such, it is very important for all Muslims to know about the battle. Therefore, I want to ask both of you, what did you both learn from this week's Friday sermon?
I learned that Hazrat Sa'd anhu is such a high devotion to the Holy Prophet ﷺ that he said he would either get rid of the enemy or he would be martyred in the battle.
I learned that you should always try to not give up, no matter how harsh the conditions are, and to always put your trust in Allah.
Very well done to the both of you. Now, I also want to know what all of you from across the globe have learned from this week's Friday sermon. Therefore, let's head into our next segment, Kids Take.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. In today's Friday sermon, beloved Huzoor ibn Aziz told us that at one point in the Battle of Uhud, Holy Prophet ﷺ stationed Hazrat Sa'd anhu in front of him. Hazrat Sa'd anhu would shoot arrows whilst praying, "O Allah, this is your arrow. May you strike the enemy with it." And the Holy Prophet ﷺ would pray, "O Allah, accept Hazrat Sa'd's prayer and make his aim accurate." When Hazrat Sa'd ran out of arrows, the Holy Prophet ﷺ gave him his. Jazakallah.
In today's Friday sermon, I learned that in the Battle of Uhud, Hazrat Hind's brother, son and husband were martyred, but she said that as long as the Holy Prophet ﷺ was fine, then everything else was fine. Jazakallah.
Excellent job to all of you across the globe, and like always, we'd love to hear you. So send us your videos and we can inshallah include you in our next episode. Now, let's get back into our discussion. So Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, started his Friday sermon by talking about a particular companion. Can one of you tell me his name, and can the other tell me that story that Huzoor mentioned about that companion?
Yeah, The companion was Hazrat Sa'd radiallahu anhu.
And Huzoor mentioned that whenever Hazrat Sa'd anhu shot an arrow, the Holy Prophet ﷺ prayed to Allah that may the arrow hit its mark.
Huzoor also mentioned that when Hazrat Sa'd anhu shot his arrow, he said, "O Allah, this is your arrow. May you strike an enemy with it." And at the same time, the Holy Prophet ﷺ would pray that, "O Allah, make Sa'd's aim true. O Sa'd, may my parents be sacrificed for you." Huzoor mentioned that till the very end of Hazrat Sa'd's life, he recalled this prayer of the Holy Prophet ﷺ during that battle.
That is incredible.
This shows us the connection the Holy Prophet ﷺ had with his companions.
That's a very good observation. Now, let's head into our next segment where our good friend Ubadur Rahman will help us understand a word that Huzoor mentioned within his khutbah. Therefore, Ubadur Rahman, please take it away, my friend.
Jazakallah, guys. So today, our word is zakhmi. Zakhmi comes from the Urdu word zakham. Zakhmi means wound. So when somebody says they're zakhmi, that means they're wounded. This is related to the Friday sermon because Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, said that the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was zakhmi during the Battle of Uhud. Hope that helps. Back over to you guys.
Jazakallah Ubadur Rahman for your explanation of that word and for helping us better understand Huzoor's khutbah.
If I remember correctly, I think Huzoor mentioned that there is a Quranic verse revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ during the battle, right?
Yes, that's true. That's a good question, Hassan. And considering how good of an answer you provided to my previous question, Haris, why don't you take the wheel on this question and answer Hassan's question for us?
No problem, Farhan Bhai. Huzoor mentioned that during the Battle of Uhud, Khalid bin Walid led a group of Quraysh up to a hill where the Holy Prophet ﷺ was on. Then the Holy Prophet ﷺ said Hazrat Umar anhu and prayed, after which a Quranic verse was revealed.
Beautifully explained, Haris. Now the verse that was revealed to the Holy Prophet ﷺ at the time was as follows: "Slacken not nor grieve, and you shall definitely have the upper hand if you are believers." And this verse can actually be found in chapter 3, verse 140 of the Holy Quran. Now, Huzoor also talked about the value that the companions had in the eyes of the Holy Prophet ﷺ by shedding light on the concern that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had during the battle. Huzoor mentioned that Hazrat Talha radiallahu anhu was protecting the Holy Prophet ﷺ during the Battle of Uhud. And Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came upon the Holy Prophet ﷺ during the battle and saw that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was injured. Instead of getting Hazrat Abu Bakr to tend to himself, the Holy Prophet ﷺ told Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu to look at Hazrat Talha radiallahu anhu and tend to his injuries. And this was because Hazrat Talha was bleeding profusely from his injuries. This shows the value that the companions had in the eyes of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. In addition, Huzoor mentioned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ did not go back to Medina till all of the tasks were completed within Uhud. So, in other words, he did not go back solely because of the Holy Prophet ﷺ's injuries.
Wow, the revelation of the Quranic verse truly highlights how Allah was always there supporting the Muslims.
Yeah, it is so amazing to see that the Holy Prophet ﷺ cared about the other companions despite being injured himself.
Now, I think it is time for a little break. So, I hope you both are ready for our next segment because we're going to be testing your knowledge from this week's sermon. So for that, let's head into our next segment, Question of the Sermon. I am sure you both are very well versed in this segment of our show. However, for our audience, let's go over the rules for the question of the sermon again. Now, I'll give you both the question and then 10 seconds to think of the answer. Is that good? Yeah. Now, here is the question. Huzoor mentioned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ supported Hazrat Sa'd anhu during the Battle of Uhud. How exactly did the Holy Prophet ﷺ support Hazrat Sa'd? Now here are your four options. Option A, the Holy Prophet ﷺ provided Hazrat Sa'd anhu with arrows, out of which one of them unexpectedly was the fastest. B, Holy Prophet ﷺ provided Hazrat Sa'd with armor. Option C, Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ provided reinforcements to Hazrat Sa'd. And your last option, option D, Holy Prophet ﷺ prayed for Hazrat Sa'd anhu from afar. Now here your 10 seconds begins now. All right, your time is up. What are your answers?
I think it's option A.
Me too. I'm also going with A.
Excellent job, you two. You both got it correct. It is option A. Huzoor mentioned that during the Battle of Uhud, Hazrat Sa'd anhu ran out of arrows. And so the Holy Prophet ﷺ started to provide him with arrows. And during this process, the Holy Prophet ﷺ accidentally gave Hazrat Sa'd anhu an arrow without a point. Surprisingly, when this arrow was shot by Hazrat Sa'd, it turned out to be the fastest arrow out of all the arrows that were provided before. In the last few remarks about the Battle of Uhud, Huzoor mentioned two noble women. Can both of you tell me who those two noble women were?
I can go first. Huzoor firstly talked about Hazrat Hamna radhiyallahu anha, who patiently accepted the deaths of her brother and uncle, but cried at the news of her husband's death.
Huzoor also mentioned Hazrat Hind anha, who was steadfast even after losing 3 family members. And she highlighted that the fulfillment of the pledge that her husband made of being martyred in the battle.
Excellent job, you two. Now regarding the Sahabiya that you mentioned, Haris, Huzoor mentioned that when Hazrat Hamna anha received the news of the martyrdom of her brother and uncle, she took that news very patiently. However, when she received the news of the martyrdom of her husband, she started to cry. And to this, Huzoor mentioned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ stated how the bond between a husband and a wife is like no other. Now in regards to your Sahabiya Hassan, Hazrat Hind anha, it is stated that Hazrat Aisha anha wanted to figure out some news about the Battle of Uhud. As such, she set out. And on her way, she encountered Hazrat Hind anha. And she asked Hazrat Hind anha, do you know anything about the war? And Hazrat Hind anha replied that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is all right. And if he is all right, then nothing else matters. And this was said by Hazrat Hind despite her son, her brother, and her husband being martyred during the battle. In addition to this, Huzoor mentioned that Hazrat Hind was returning to Medina with the 3 bodies of her family members. But her camel kept swiftly turning towards Uhud. And so Hazrat Hind anha went to the Holy Prophet ﷺ about this. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ asked Hazrat Hind, did your husband make a pledge before the war? And Hazrat Hind replied by saying that her husband prayed to Allah saying, please do not return me to Medina disgraced. Martyr me within the battle. And so to this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ replied that sometimes Allah Ta'ala accepts a statement that a person says when they place it upon God. And in this case, Hazrat Hind's husband was one of those few people.
Did you enjoy this week's Friday Sermon for Kids? Want to know how you can make it even better? Tell us what you learned from beloved Huzoor's Friday Sermon and send your videos at FS4KIDS@mta.tv no later than every Sunday, and we'll try our best to include them in next week's episode.
Now we can't include all the videos you guys sent to us. So you guys can visit our Instagram and Twitter at MTA Canada and see all the videos you guys sent to us. Remember, at Friday Sermon for Kids, you're not just the audience, you make the show.
And that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Why not we give our audience a little recap about what we learned today?
Huzoor started by talking about Hazrat Sa'd radiallahu anhu and how he continuously rained arrows upon the enemy. Every time he loaded one of the arrows, he prayed that the arrow may hit the enemy.
Huzoor also mentioned the revelation of a Quranic verse after when the Holy Prophet ﷺ ordered Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu to go fight Khalid bin Walid and the Quraysh on the hill.
Excellent job, you two. Huzoor also mentioned the concern that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had for his companions during the Battle of Uhud. And Huzoor also mentioned the two noble women during the Battle of Uhud, Hazrat Hamna radiallahu anha and Hazrat Hind radiallahu anha, and how they steadfastly and very bravely took the news of the martyrdom of their family members. Lastly, Huzoor talked about how every Ahmadi should be praying for the dire conditions of the world, especially Palestine. Huzoor mentioned that the world powers seem to be fanning the flames rather than working towards gaining world peace. Huzoor also advised all Ahmadis to start collecting food for rationing for around 2 to 3 months, even if a war doesn't break out. And that brings us to the end of today's episode.
Jazakallah for tuning in.
And make sure to watch the full Friday sermon if you haven't already.
And until next time,
Khuda Hafiz.
मगर है शर्त तुमसे मुसलसल राबता रखना मगर है शर्त तुम उससे मुसलसल राबता रखना इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होंठों पर दुआ रखना इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना